like, share, and subscribe. Cold steel bars. The echo of footsteps down a long corridor. A small window lets in a slice of winter light. I sit alone in my cell, thinking about a life no one should ever know, and yet, a life I lived fully. The nickname, the myth, the media fascination, it all begins with a simple truth. I am Richard Kuklinski, and I killed. But before the killings, before the nickname, before the money and the methods, there was Jersey City, 1935, a house where the walls heard more screams than laughter. My father drank like the world owed him something, and when it didn't, his fists reminded us what pain looked like. My mother was quiet, silent or scared, maybe both, and my brother Joseph. I loved him, but fear and rivalry lived in the same space as affection. One night, in a swirl of violence I barely understood, he was gone. No explanation, no mourning that made sense to a child. Just the cold, hard fact that someone could vanish in an instant. That lesson stayed with me. Survival became instinct. Watching became second nature. I learned to take what I wanted because no one else would, or if they did, they would regret it. I learned to hide the hurt, hide the fear, hide the growing darkness inside me. That darkness, nurtured by years of abuse and neglect, would one day become my tool. I grew into adolescence hardened, detached. Friends and schoolmates knew little of my home life. I smiled, I participated, but inside I was calculating, observing. By the time I was a young man, I understood one vital principle. Power was survival. Marriage, children, the suburban facade, I adopted it with ease. I was big rich to the neighbors. Lawn mowed, snow cleared, tools in order, a face smiling at Little League games. No one suspected the other side of me, the side that could plan, execute, and disappear without leaving a trace. My first murders were not about thrill. They were about necessity, profit, and control. A man crossed me over a deal. Small, but enough to trigger me. I acted and immediately felt the duality. No remorse, only clarity. I realized that control over life and death was intoxicating. And in that moment, the trajectory of my life crystallized. Money followed. Crime was a ledger, and I became methodical. Pornography distribution, fencing, burglary, small crimes at first, escalating as I learned the patterns. Those who could pay for problems to vanish sought me out. That was the beginning of my connection to organized crime. I learned discretion, efficiency, precision. The mob needed someone who could deliver death cleanly, and I filled that role. Methods became my craft. Cyanide in coffee, explosives in toys, rifles, knives, and once, a crossbow. Bodies sometimes stayed in my freezer. 2.5 years once, like tools stored neatly in a workshop. Every act was measured, every disappearance carefully orchestrated. Then came the undercover operation in 1986. Dominic Polifrone. Clever, patient, cautious. He approached as an associate, spoke the language, played the part. I trusted him, believed he could handle the business. But he was law, and he recorded every conversation, every method, every confession. I underestimated him, and once the trap was set, there was no escape. In court, I heard the essence of what prosecutors told the jury. I killed for profit, I set men up, and when they disappeared, the money ended in my hands. The defense argued I was a storyteller, a man with an inflated image, but the jury focused on evidence, recorded confessions, physical proof, and the pattern of my life. I received consecutive life sentences. The law measured what it could, and that became my reality. But even in prison, I spoke. HBO, journalists, authors, they came for the man behind the legend. I confessed, boasted, reflected. Some things were true, others unverified. People wanted hundreds of murders, mob hits, a fully mythic killer. I gave them pieces, watched the fascination grow. Years later, in 2003, another confession caught attention. Detective Peter Calabro. I described it in detail, and the court added 30 more years to my sentence. The law weighed the confession, verified the facts it could, and my past became concrete in the system. People ask if I feel remorse. I don't. At the moment of each act, there was only clarity and purpose. Only consequence arrives later. in trials, in grief, in the reflection of others' loss. The media spun tales, films, and books mythologized my life. Michael Shannon portrayed me on screen, audiences intrigued by the duality. Loving father, cold-blooded killer. Reality was simpler. I was a man who did terrible things and survived longer than most anticipated. Some confessions uncorroborated, others verified. That's where legend and law diverge. I analyzed my life in prison. Childhood trauma, broken family, violence learned and endured. Maybe it explains some choices, but it never excuses them. I acted, I adapted, I killed. The law can only measure what it proves. They did. Multiple murders, a life sentenced behind bars. Lessons? Don't romanticize myths, don't chase the legend. My life is cautionary. Unhealed wounds can shape darkness. Appearances mask what lies beneath. Justice measures what it finds. I died in 2006, 70 years of a life lived in extremes. Time to law is absolute. Time to myth is elastic. People will argue over how many I killed, who I worked for, which confessions were true. But here's the truth. I am Richard Kuklinski. I lived, I killed, I was convicted, and I'm gone. I kept bodies on ice. I kept secrets in my mind. I lived a double life in plain sight. The lesson? Darkness can wear a familiar face, and justice only measures what it uncovers.